Yeah.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Here's our next adventure in um, whole plant foods and how important they are. That's to our health. And tonight's topic is going to be dementia, which I'm sure a number of you either are attending this class because you are worried about getting dementia yourself, or perhaps you know someone who has dementia. Most all of us, I believe, have had some interaction with this. It's a horrible disease none of us want. Um, so, yeah, we're all kind of on board with that issue, I suspect. So, um, with that said, just we can take a couple questions if is anything before we get started. And then I've got a number of videos that I want to share with you tonight. And hopefully you'll find them entertaining and engaging, and you'll learn a few things at the same time. So I'm gonna look at the view here, or the gallery, see if there's anybody who has any question before we get started. Yeah, Van.
My dad was lucky. My mom had what's called pleasant dementia.
What kind of dementia?
Yeah, pleasant.
Pleasant?
That possible? How's that possible?
Yeah, so this was, oh, God knows, maybe 20, 25 years ago. He comes and shows me a Newsweek article.
I've never heard that term used before.
Pleasant dementia.
Scott, have you heard that before?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe pleasant dementia meant that they were a pleasant personality instead of aggressive.
Yeah, that's what it meant.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not particularly used these days, but that's interesting. Anything else? Any other comments?
I have a comment.
Yes, Kim.
My cousin was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and his doctor told him that he needs to have, maybe it was unrelated to that, but that he needs to have protein. So we went out to dinner because I went to go visit them in Borrego Springs. And I sat next to him, and he had a plate that had a potato and broccoli and a piece of meat. I think it was a steak or something. And because his doctor said that he needed to have protein, he only ate the meat.
Wow.
And I said, I'm pretty sure the doctor didn't mean to the exclusively eat protein, especially if you've got prostate cancer. Come on.
What did he say to that?
Plus the broccoli and the potato have protein in it
too. I know. So I have snuck recipes to his wife, and I've sent a bunch of stuff to his wife, and she's very open to it. So she said when he's home, she'll make sure he has a lot of vegetables, and when he goes out, she can't control it. But I think that's what's happening with this whole hysteria about protein. And it seems to me that they're telling older people, make sure you get enough protein. And I always give them the same argument about, well, what are the biggest animals on the planet? What do they eat? They've got protein. Oh yeah. How do they get where's their protein? I said, in their muscles. How do you think they build muscles? So, oh man, this is
good for you.
It's crazy. It's crazy though, that hysteria about protein.
Kim, are you at the fasting place?
No, I go next Tuesday.
Oh yeah.
That's why Garth Davis wrote his book, Proteinaholic. He got frustrated with it also. Any other comments? Yes, Van.
I had a question. Remember, Scott, when we worked together, and how I was concerned about kidney stones.
Yeah.
And so, I haven't been having turmeric. And I think, Charlie, did you mention one time, I might try 500 milligrams of turmeric a day, maybe.
Uh-huh.
Of a teaspoon. Actually, a teaspoon's about 240, I think. I was just looking, if I remember right, but I go onto a website and it says, oh, that's a real doable amount. There's not going to be any problem with that amount. And they had some specifics about how it's doesn't actually put many oxalates in your body, and not a problem. And a typical amount, they were saying, more of a pain amount, to fight pain, might be 3 times a day, 500 milligrams. So, I'm not too concerned about, this is a powder, just a teaspoon of powder. But that's you guys, you and Scott would say that seems reasonable, right? Because
I didn't quite get what's reasonable.
teaspoon of the powder a day.
I wouldn't start with that. I'd start with a quarter teaspoon, like Gregor recommends, and then I'd go up maybe up to a teaspoon a day.
Diarrhea, or
I'd go up to it as long as you weren't getting like stomach irritation or maybe diarrhea or whatever other side effects you might get. But I think he said up to a teaspoon or two. I can't remember. He has a video on it. If you search his site, nutritionfacts.org, you'll do a search for curcumin or turmeric, and he'll give you the maximum dose he thought.
why start with a smaller amount?
He starts with a quarter of a teaspoon. That's
Yeah.
his recommendation.
Yeah, did he say why at all?
I can't remember. There's a
Yeah.
good video on it, though. If you can't find it, let me know and I'll try to look it up.
Scott, why started a smaller amount?
Well, just for tolerance. I mean, just like anything, you wouldn't want to start with a huge dose until you know how it affects you.
Yeah, it
Some
sounded
people don't tolerate it very well, man.
stomach and diarrhea, maybe.
I haven't seen any side effects other than people don't like the taste.
Yeah.
So we're going to get
Yeah.
on with dementia because that's what our talk is about. And I just want to make sure that there's no one else who has any quick questions before. We've got a lot of videos to share with you. And so I'm going to start with the first one. I've got to share this first. And oops, I didn't push. It's a little bit different sharing experience than I'm used to. Okay, there we go. And now let's start with our first video. This is sort of an idea of, what the problems with dementia are, how extensive it is. It's just a short video. So it's a problem that doesn't look like it's going away very soon. But even though there are so many people who ultimately may wind up with this diagnosis, I want to start out with giving you hope for the future. So I'm going to provide a testimonial for you that Dr. Gregor has done, and it's about Dean Ornish's study on dementia. And let's see, where am I at here? I got to go back to this, and here we go.
On Friday, I released a video profiling Dr. Dean Ornish's landmark new study in the leading peer-reviewed Alzheimer's translational research journal, a randomized controlled trial showing that a plant-based diet and lifestyle program may significantly improve cognition and function after 20 weeks in many patients with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. About 70% remained stable or actually improved in the plant-based intervention group, whereas in the control group, about 70% got worse, and not a single person got better. But no matter how significant the results, the dry statistics just don't convey the human impact. Many patients who experienced improvement reported regaining cognition and function they had lost, but how does that actually translate into real life? Well, for example, several patients in the intervention group reported that they had been unable to read a book or watch a movie because they kept forgetting what they just read or watched and had to keep starting over. But after the plant-based diet and lifestyle changes, they got better, such that now they were able to read and watch shows again. One individual reported that it used to take him weeks to finish reading a book, but after participating in the study, he was able to do it in a matter of days. Another participant, a former business executive, reported regaining the ability to manage his own finances and investments. "It was so much a part of my life," he said, "who I am and who I was. It was hard saying that part of me was just gone. But now I'm back to reconciling our finances monthly. I keep up to date on our investments. A lot of self-worth comes back." Another one said that for 5 years she had been unable to prepare their family business's financial reports, but now she's doing so accurately. "A deep sense of identity is returning. It's given me a new lease on life, and yet it's a familiarity and something I've always prided myself on. I'm coming back like I was prior to the Alzheimer's disease being diagnosed. I feel like I'm me again, an older but better version of me." But even words are hard to describe such transformations. One of Dr. Ornish's study participants gave us permission to share his story. Dan Jones is a musician at military events and parades who is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
What have you noticed that you can do now that you couldn't do before?
Well, for one thing, I had a set of about 8 tunes that I played in the parade.
Right.
And I could just go straight through them, from one into the other. I played for an hour and a half without stopping, I think it was. It was pretty close. They moved darn slow in that parade. I was leaving them behind walking. I kept having to stop and waiting for them to catch up.
Was that something different?
Yeah,
In
it
what way?
was. Well, that I could remember the order, that I could make the transition from tune to tune without messing up and getting confused about which tune I was playing. Those were all problems I'd had when we were playing at the graduation ceremony. You know, I'd forget which tune was coming next. I'd get worried about it, and I'd start making mistakes. And this just went like clockwork. A lot of it had to do with practice, but the tunes we played before, I played hundreds of times, and I was messing up. And in the parade, I hardly messed up at all.
And you were messing up because you had a hard time remembering?
Because I had a hard time remembering. I'd get confused about different tunes. It was really, it was not a pleasant experience. It was unpleasant enough that, like I said, I went home and I put them down.
And now?
Now, there was one day a couple of weeks ago when I really had the drones in tune. And it was in the evening. I was out on the front porch playing, and it was just so beautiful. I played for 2 hours. I just stood there and played.
What are you feeling now?
Joy?
No.
No, just happy. You know, women always say they're crying because they're happy. I'm crying because I'm happy. It was so nice to be able to do that again.
And did that make you feel better about yourself too?
It did.
In what way?
I just felt like I could do something, like I had worth again, so to speak. Something that was important to me was given back.
Here's what the head of Harvard's Brain Center at Mass General had to say. Big Pharma has invested billions in the effort to find medications to treat the disease, but only 2 Alzheimer's drugs have been approved in the last 20 years, one of which has already just been pulled off the market, and the other is minimally effective, extremely expensive, and often has pesky side effects, such as brain swelling or bleeding into the brain. In contrast, the intensive lifestyle changes implemented in this study have been shown here to improve cognition and function at the cost of, like, buying broccoli, and the only side effects are positive ones.
So I'm going to stop there for a second and see if there are any questions before I get on to Dr. Neil Bernard. Scott and I were down in Los Angeles at the Plantrician conference, and we got to hear Dean Ornish give a talk and share some of the participants. This was one of them that he shared. And it was pretty emotional and inspiring at the same time. So we thought we should share that with you. I want to get on to Neil Barnard's video. It's a little bit longer, but it's worth the wait. It's worth the time. And it's on power foods for the brain. And let's hear what he has to say.
Thank you for joining me. On February 8th, 2012, my father passed away. And the truth is, that was the day his heart stopped beating. For all intents and purposes, my father had died years earlier. It started with memory lapses, and as time went on, his memory failed more and more, and it got to the point where he didn't know his own kids who came in to see him. And his personality changed, and his ability to take care of himself was completely gone. And if you could make a list of all the things that could ever happen to you, the very last thing on your list, the very bottom of the list, the thing you want the least is Alzheimer's disease. Because when you lose your memory, you lose everything. You lose everyone who ever mattered.
With iPad.
And
Not yet.
if you could look into
I'm
the
using
brain.
this tonight.
Okay, I need to kind of
Here.
stop for a second, and
Thank you.
I need to mute everybody in the room. Let's see if I can find the mute button. I'll find it here somewhere. Okay, that mutes everybody and any current ones. Sorry about that. It's just the wonders of modern technology. Now I need to go back and share for a moment. Just need to find the share button. We're on to there. Sharing. And let's get back to Dr. Barnard.
Half of Americans by their mid-80s on a microscopic slide. And they shouldn't be there, and they're a hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. And this disease affects about half of Americans by their mid-80s. And you could say to your doctor, okay, I don't want that. What can I do to stop that? And your doctor will say, well, it's old age and it's genetics. There's a gene, it's called the ApoE epsilon 4 allele. And if you've got this gene from one parent, your risk is tripled. If you got it from both parents, your risk is 10 to 15 times higher than it was before. What's the answer? Get new parents? No, I don't think so. That's not it. So I'm sorry, it's old age, it's genes, period, that's it. There's not a darn thing you can do, just wait for it to happen. Or maybe not. In Chicago, researchers started something called the Chicago Health and Aging Project. And what they did was they looked at what people in Chicago were eating. They did very careful dietary records in hundreds and hundreds of people. And then they started to see who, as the years go by, stayed mentally clear and who developed dementia. And the first thing they keyed in on was something that I knew about as a kid growing up in Fargo, North Dakota. My mom had 5 kids. We would run down to the kitchen to the smell of bacon. And my mom would take a fork and she'd stick it into the frying pan and pull the hot bacon strips out and put them on a paper towel to cool down. And when all the bacon was out of the pan, she would carefully lift up that hot pan and pour the grease into a jar to save it. That's good bacon grease. You don't want to lose that. And my mother would take that jar and she would put it not in the refrigerator, but she put it on the shelf. Because my mother knew that as bacon grease cools down, what happens to it? It solidifies. And that's the fact that it's solid at room temperature is a sign that bacon grease is loaded with saturated fat. Bad fat. We've known for a long time that that raises cholesterol, and there's a lot of it in bacon grease. And by the way, the next day she would spoon it back into the frying pan and fry eggs in it. It's amazing any of her children lived to adulthood, but that's the way we lived. Now, the number one source of saturated fat is actually not bacon, it's dairy products, cheese and milk and so forth, and meat is number 2. And in Chicago, some people ate relatively little saturated fat, around 13 grams a day, and others ate about twice that much. And the researchers just looked at who developed Alzheimer's disease. And can I show you the figures? Here's the low group, and there's the high group. In other words, if you were avoiding the bad fat, your risk was pretty low. But if you were tucking into the cheese and the bacon strips, your risk was 2, 3, or more fold higher. And then they looked not just at saturated fat, they looked at the fat that's in donuts and pastries. You know what that is, that trans fats, you'll see it on the labels. And they found the very same pattern there too. So the people who tended to avoid the saturated fat and the trans fats, we want to avoid them for cholesterol and heart disease reasons, but they also seem to affect the brain. Then researchers in Finland said, wait a minute, let's go further. There is a condition we call mild cognitive impairment. You're still yourself, you're managing your checkbook, you're driving, your friends know it's you, but you're having mental lapses, especially for names and for words. And they brought in over 1,000 adults, they were 50 years old, and they looked at their diets. And then as time went on, they looked to see who developed mild cognitive impairment. Now, some of these people ate relatively little fat, some people ate a fair amount, and then they looked at whose memory started to fail. And they found exactly the same pattern. In other words, it's not just will I get Alzheimer's disease, but will I just have old age memory problems? Well, what about that gene? That ApoE epsilon 4 allele, the one that condemns you to Alzheimer's disease. Well, they then redid the study, and they focused only on those people. And some of these people ate relatively little fat, some people ate more, and exactly the same. In other words, if you are avoiding the bad fats, even if you have the gene, your risk of developing memory problems was cut by 80%. And this is my most important point. Genes are not destiny. Now let's take another look in those plaques. We know there's beta amyloid protein, but there's also iron and copper. Metals in my brain, that's right. There are metals in foods, and they get into the brain. Now think about this. I have a cast iron pan, and we had a backyard barbecue, and a week later I remember, I left my fry pan on the picnic table, and it rained last week. What happened to my pan? It rusted, and that rust is oxidation. Or you take a shiny new penny, and does it stay shiny forever? No, it oxidizes too. Well, iron and copper oxidize in your body. And as they do that, they cause the production of what are called free radicals. You've heard of free radicals. The free radicals are molecules that are swimming around in your bloodstream, and they get into the brain, and they act like sparks that singe through the connections between one cell and the next. So how is this happening? Where am I getting all this iron? Where am I getting all this copper? How can that be? Well, how many people have a cast iron pan? Let me see hands. Now, if that's your once-a-month pan, I'm going to say, who cares? But if it's every single day, you're getting the iron into your food, and it's more iron than your body needs. Or copper pipes? Who's got copper pipes? Well, the water sits in the copper pipes all night long, and in the morning it goes into the coffee maker, and you're drinking that copper, and you're getting more than you need, and it starts producing these free radicals that go to the brain. Now, if you're a meat eater, or especially liver, there's iron and copper in those foods too. And we used to think, isn't that great? Until we realized iron is a double-edged sword. You need a little bit, but if you have too much, it becomes toxic. Vitamins. Vitamin manufacturers put in vitamin A and the B vitamins and vitamin C and vitamin D, and then they throw in iron and copper, thinking, well, you need these, not recognizing you're already getting enough in foods, and if they add it to your supplement, you are getting too much. Okay, so what am I saying? What am I saying is, aside from the fact that the saturated fat and the trans fats will increase our risk, these metals will too, and they are causing sparks to form in the brain, free radicals to form, that singe through the connections. And if that's the case, then I need a fire extinguisher. And we have one, and it's called vitamin E. Now, vitamin E is in spinach, and it's in mangoes, and it's especially in nuts and seeds. And in Chicago, some people eat a little bit of it, and some people eat a lot of it. And the beauty of this is vitamin E is an antioxidant. It knocks out free radicals. And so if what I'm saying is true, then the people in Chicago who ate only a little bit of vitamin E would be at much higher risk than people who ate a lot. And that's exactly what the research showed. People getting 8 milligrams a day of vitamin E cut their risk of Alzheimer's by about half compared to people getting less than that. Okay, how do I get that? Well, it's very, very easy. Run to the store and just buy a bottle of vitamin E pills. No, I don't think so. And here's why not. Nature has 8 forms of vitamin E that they build into, it's built into nuts and into seeds, but if I put it into my supplement pill, I can legally call it vitamin E if it has only one form. And if you're eating too much of one form of vitamin E, it reduces your absorption of all the others. So you want to get it from food. That's the form that nature has designed for us, and that's the form that we've evolved with. Okay, now we can go a step further. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, how much should I have? If I put some nuts or seeds into the palm of my hand, by the time it hits your fingers, that's just 1 ounce. And that's about 5 milligrams of vitamin E right there. Now the trick is, don't eat it, because if you do, you know what happens if you have those nice salty almonds and you've eaten them? You fill your hand again, and then you eat it again. And there's something about salty cashews and almonds. Is it just me? There's something about them. They're a little bit addicting in some way. So don't do that. That's going to be way more than you need. The answer is pour them into your hand and then crumble them up and put them on your salad, or put them on your oatmeal or on your pancakes or something. Use them as a flavoring, not as a snack food, and there you're going to be okay. All right, researchers at the University of Cincinnati went one step further. Not just saturated fat, not just trans fats, not just vitamin E, but they said, what about color? Look at blueberries and grapes. That color that they have is dramatic. And the colors of blueberries aren't just there to make them pretty. Those are called anthocyanins. They brought in a group of individuals into a research study. Average age, 78, and everyone was already having memory problems. And what they asked them to do was to have grape juice, a pint a day. A cup in the morning, a cup at night. Okay. 3 months later, they tested everyone, and their memory was better, and their recall was better. 3 months? That sounds too easy. How can that be? Well, think about it. A grape has a rough life. A grape has to sit on the vine all day long under the sun and exposed to the elements, and it has no protection. Or does it? that purple color, those anthocyanins, happen to be powerful antioxidants, just like vitamin E, but they're the grape form. And if you consume them, they go into your bloodstream. And if that's true, it doesn't have to be grapes. It could be anything that has that color, like blueberries. So back into the laboratory, a new group of patients, they came in, they all had memory problems, and 3 months on blueberry juice, their memory was better. Their recall was better. Now, the moral of the story is not to have grapes and blueberry juice and grape juice. No, the answer is color. If you look at the colorful foods, there's an important lesson there for us. You walk into the grocery store, and from 100 feet away, looking at the produce department, you can recognize beta-carotene, lycopene, anthocyanins. Your retina can detect them because that's the orange color of a carrot, or the red color of a tomato, or the purple color of a grape. And the brain also tells you they're pretty, they're attractive. You can recognize antioxidants, you're drawn to them. So back in 2009, my organization, the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, went to the Department of Agriculture. And we said, this is important. Let's throw out the pyramid. The pyramid was a nice shape, but it had a meat group and it had a dairy group, despite the fact that people who don't eat meat or dairy products happen to be healthier than people who eat them. And also, who eats off a pyramid anyway? We eat off a plate. So we devised a plate that said fruits and grains and legumes, that's the bean group, and vegetables, and those should be the staples. Well, we gave this to the USDA in 2009, and we didn't hear back from them. So, in 2011, we sued the federal government. The Physicians Committee filed a lawsuit against the USDA simply to compel response. And did you see what the US government came out with in 2011? I'm not taking any credit for this, but this is now US government policy. It's called MyPlate, and it does look in some ways similar to what we'd sent them a couple of years earlier. Fruits and grains and vegetables, and they have this thing called the protein group. Now, the protein group could be meat, but it could be beans or tofu or nuts or anything that's high in protein. It doesn't have to be meat. In fact, there is no meat group anymore in federal guidelines. There's a dairy group there, but to their credit, soy milk counts. So things are improving. Now, so far what we've talked about is getting away from the saturated fat that's in cheese and bacon and meats, getting away from the trans fats in snack foods, you're having the vitamin E and the colorful foods. And there's one more step. It's not all food. There's something to say about exercise. At the University of Illinois, researchers brought in a large group of adults, 120 of them, and they said, a brisk walk 3 times a week. And after a year, everyone went into the laboratory for a brain scan. And they measured the hippocampus, which is at the center of the brain, and it's the seat of memory. It decides what should be let through into memory and what should not be let through. And it turned out that this organ, which is gradually shrinking in older adults, suddenly stopped shrinking, and the exercisers found that their hippocampus was a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger. It was as if time was going backwards. It reversed brain shrinkage, and on memory tests, they did substantially better. So I've devised my own exercise plan. I'd like to present it to you. I do this 3 times a week. Arrive at the airport as late as possible, carry massively heavy luggage, and just run for the plane. Now, at the University of Illinois, they had their own ideas, and their idea was a little simpler. Do a 10-minute walk, and do it 3 times a week. And then next week, let's do a 15-minute walk. And the week after that, 20, and all they did was add 5 minutes a week until they got to 40 minutes. And a 40-minute brisk walk, this is not a trudge, but it's a good brisk walk, 40 minutes 3 times a week is all you need to improve memory and reverse brain shrinkage. Very simple. Now, what I would like to do is to go back in time. And I want to sit down with my dad, and I want to say, Dad, I found out something really important. We can change our diet. We don't really need that cheese and that bacon stuff. There's plenty of healthy things that we can eat. Let's bring in the colorful vegetables and fruits. Let's make them part of our everyday fare. Let's lace up our sneakers. Let's exercise together. It's too late for him. But it's not too late for you. It's not too late for me either. And if we take advantage of what we have now learned about how we can protect our brain, then perhaps families will be able to stay together a little bit longer. Thank you very much.
I always love listening to Dr. Bernard. I think it's Barnard is how he pronounces it.
Barn. It's Barnard. Yeah, just think of a barn. Barnard.
Yeah, Barnard. Gosh. Anyway, any comments so far? We've only gone over a couple things to, what you eat, how you move. There are other things that you can do, will be the next video, which I think is also a really important one. But I just want to see if there are any questions before we move on. Yes, Sarah. Just unmute yourself.
Thank you. Can you remind me why he said, or did he say, do not take vitamin E supplements?
Yeah, so he made a point of the vitamin E supplements. What you get is probably one form of vitamin E. There are 8 different forms of vitamin E in nature when they occur in the natural source, like the nuts and seeds that you may eat. And so if you're just eating one form, it will block your body's ability to pick up on the other forms that may be in your diet. Like maybe you're eating a very few nuts and seeds and you have all the forms in there, but you're taking the supplement. So you're blocking your body's ability to pick up on these 7 other forms, different molecules, very similar.
And it's that way with almost all different supplements. You're causing imbalances in the body because you're getting too much of one particular nutrient. The body's not dumb. It's designed to get our vitamins and minerals from food, not from supplements. And so, there are a few exceptions, like we talked about in class, the B12, maybe the vitamin D, iodine, a few things. But in general, we try to get people to avoid supplements and just get their nutrients from food.
And why does that block it? Why taking one blocks the other?
Well, you have receptor sites in your body,
Okay.
Which these molecules hook up to. And if you have an overload of one type of molecule, it'll fill those sites up when you take this massive dose in comparison to the more minor amounts that you would be receiving. So it fills up if you had, like let's say you had 10 boats, 10 places to dock, and the supplement kind of filled up all those 10 places, it wouldn't allow other boats to move in there.
Well, it reminds me of why we shouldn't eat hydrogenated oils. Is that the same thing? It fills up the fatty acid, but anyway, fills it up. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Van, since your hand's up, I just need to answer this question that you asked about curcumin and turmeric. Actually, curcumin, he recommends starting with a 1/4 teaspoon of turmeric. He said there are studies that show if you extract the curcumin out of the turmeric, the studies show that it's not quite as effective as curcumin in terms of fighting cancer, in terms of fighting inflammation. However, and he says that the safe amounts of turmeric is anywhere from 1/16 of a teaspoon a day up to 2 tablespoons a day.
Yeah.
And he says that curcumin trials have used up amounts in cups of spice, around 100 times more. So that seems pretty safe. And if you add a pinch of black pepper to a high dose curcumin, it increases the bioavailability by 2,000%. So now you're getting up to 1 cup, 29 cups worth or something. He says that curcumin can lead to gallstone formation and kidney stone formation. It could also, if you had a blockage to your gallbladder, like a stone in the gallbladder duct, he said that if you took 1/3 of a teaspoon of turmeric every day, it causes the gallbladder to contract down about 50%, which could cause you significant pain if you had a blockage to the flow. But it also could theoretically clean out your gallbladder, keep you from getting stones if you were using 1/3 of a teaspoon on a regular basis. And then as far as the kidney stone issue, he said that, again, about the most he would use if people are kidney stone formers would be about a teaspoon of turmeric a day.
Oh, that's good, because I'm not really a former.
The best I can offer you. You can look that up by doing a search for curcumin or turmeric. He's got 15 different videos that you can watch if you want more.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. So I was amazed. One day, I hadn't taken it for years. I take a teaspoon, of the powder.
Yeah.
And I've been having some trouble with mainly accelerating in the bike, my left knee. Once I get going, I'm good, but I've had, and I was doing these squats, and I go to my orthopedic specialist and he says, that's a no-no. And so I'd made my knee worse, but lo and behold, I had a teaspoon today. I had no pain. And I go online and say, how can that be? And they said normally, kind of the norm is like, it takes people where they recognize benefits is like 4 to 8 weeks. So I don't know if I've just, maybe my knees healing up a little bit. I don't know what's going on, but yeah.
Well, it can reduce inflammation. And so maybe you're a lucky one. It works more quickly. Any other questions about dementia? We're going to go on then next to an important video. It's another TED Talk. As you might know by now, I love those TED Talks. And the next one is this one right here. What You Can Do to Prevent Alzheimer's by Lisa Genova. And you can find that on YouTube. You can find all these on either YouTube. You can take a picture at any time you want. They're available to you. They're all free. Either YouTube or nutritionfacts.org or Physician Committee for Responsible Medicine. Let's get on to her TED Talk. It's worth watching.
How many people here would like to live to be at least 80 years old? Yeah. I think we all have this hopeful expectation of living into old age. Let's project out into the future, to your future yous, and let's imagine that we're all 85. Now, everyone look at two people. One of you probably has Alzheimer's disease. All right. And maybe you're thinking, well, it won't be me. Then, okay, you are a caregiver. So, in some way, this terrifying disease is likely to affect us all. Part of the fear around Alzheimer's stems from the sense that there's nothing we can do about it. Despite decades of research, we still have no disease-modifying treatment and no cure. So if we're lucky enough to live long enough, Alzheimer's appears to be our brain's destiny. But maybe it doesn't have to be. What if I told you we could change these statistics, literally change our brain's destiny without relying on a cure or advancements in medicine? Let's begin by looking at what we currently understand about the neuroscience of Alzheimer's. Here's a picture of two neurons connecting. The point of connection, this space circled in red, is called a synapse. The synapse is where neurotransmitters are released. This is where signals are transmitted, where communication happens. This is where we think, feel, see, hear, desire, and remember. And the synapse is where Alzheimer's happens. Let's zoom in on the synapse and look at a cartoon representation of what's going on. During the business of communicating information, in addition to releasing neurotransmitters like glutamate into the synapse, neurons also release a small peptide called amyloid beta. Normally, amyloid beta is cleared away and metabolized by microglia, the janitor cells of our brains. While the molecular causes of Alzheimer's are still debated, most neuroscientists believe that the disease begins when amyloid beta begins to accumulate. Too much is released or not enough is cleared away, and the synapse begins to pile up with amyloid beta. And when this happens, it binds to itself, forming sticky aggregates called amyloid plaques. How many people here are 40 years old or older? Yeah, you're afraid to admit it now. This initial step into the disease, this presence of amyloid plaques accumulating, can already be found in your brains. Now, the only way we could be sure of this would be through a PET scan, because at this point, you are blissfully unaware. You're not showing any impairments in memory, language, or cognition. Yet. We think it takes at least 15 to 20 years of amyloid plaque accumulation before it reaches a tipping point, then triggering a molecular cascade that causes the clinical symptoms of the disease. Prior to the tipping point, your lapses in memory might include things like, why did I come in this room? Or, oh, what's his name? Or, where did I put my keys? Yeah, now before you all start freaking out again, because I know half of you did at least one of those in the last 24 hours, these are all normal kinds of forgetting. In fact, I would argue that these examples might not even involve your memory because you didn't pay attention to where you put your keys in the first place. After the tipping point, the glitches in memory, language, and cognition are different. Instead of eventually finding your keys in your coat pocket or on the table by the door, you find them in the refrigerator. Or you find them and you think, what are these for? Okay, so what happens when amyloid plaques accumulate to this tipping point? Our microglia janitor cells become hyperactivated, releasing chemicals that cause inflammation and cellular damage. We think they might actually start clearing away the synapses themselves. A crucial neural transport protein called tau becomes hyperphosphorylated and twists itself into something called tangles, which choke off the neurons from the inside. By mid-stage Alzheimer's, we have massive inflammation and tangles, an all-out war at the synapse, and cell death. So if you were a scientist trying to cure this disease, at what point would you ideally want to intervene? Many scientists are betting big on the simplest solution: keep amyloid plaques from reaching that tipping point, which means that drug discovery is largely focused on developing a compound that will prevent, eliminate, or reduce amyloid plaque accumulation. And so the cure for Alzheimer's will likely be a preventative medicine. We're going to have to take this pill before we reach that tipping point, before the cascade is triggered, before we start leaving our keys in the refrigerator. We think this is why, to date, these kinds of drugs have failed in clinical trials, not because the science wasn't sound, but because the people in these trials were already symptomatic. It was too late. Think of amyloid plaques as a lit match. At the tipping point, the match sets fire to the forest. Once the forest is ablaze, it doesn't do any good to blow out the match. You have to blow out the match before the forest catches fire. Even before scientists sort this out, this information is actually really good news for us, because it turns out that the way we live can influence the accumulation of amyloid plaques. And so there are things we can do to keep us from reaching that tipping point. Let's picture your risk of Alzheimer's as a seesaw scale. We're going to pile risk factors on one arm, and when that arm hits the floor, you are symptomatic and diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Let's imagine you're 50 years old. You're not a spring chicken anymore, so you've accumulated some amyloid plaques with age. Your scale is tipped a little bit. Now let's look at your DNA. We've all inherited our genes from our moms and our dads. Some of these genes will increase our risk and some will decrease it. If you're like Alice and still Alice, you've inherited a rare genetic mutation that cranks out amyloid beta, and this alone will tip your scale arm to the ground. But for most of us, the genes we inherit will only tip the arm a bit. For example, ApoE4 is a gene variant that increases amyloid, but you can inherit a copy of ApoE4 from mom and dad and still never get Alzheimer's, which means that for most of us, our DNA alone does not determine whether we get Alzheimer's. So what does? We can't do anything about getting older or the genes we've inherited. So far, we haven't changed our brain's destiny. What about sleep? In slow-wave deep sleep, our glial cells rinse cerebral spinal fluid throughout our brains, clearing away metabolic waste that accumulated in our synapses while we were awake. Deep sleep is like a power cleanse for the brain. But what happens if you shortchange yourself on sleep? Many scientists believe that poor sleep hygiene might actually be a predictor of Alzheimer's. A single night of sleep deprivation leads to an increase in amyloid beta. And amyloid accumulation has been shown to disrupt sleep, which in turn causes more amyloid to accumulate. And so now we have this positive feedback loop that's going to accelerate the tipping of that scale. What else? Cardiovascular health. High blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, smoking, high cholesterol have all been shown to increase our risk of developing Alzheimer's. Some autopsy studies have shown that as many as 80% of people with Alzheimer's also had cardiovascular disease. Aerobic exercise has been shown in many studies to decrease amyloid beta in animal models of the disease. So, a heart-healthy Mediterranean lifestyle and diet can help to counter the tipping of this scale. Okay, so there are many things we can do to prevent or delay the onset of Alzheimer's, but let's say you haven't done any of them. Let's say you're 65. There's Alzheimer's in your family, so you've likely inherited a gene or two that tips your scale arm a bit. You've been burning the candle at both ends for years. You love bacon, and you don't run unless someone's chasing you. Let's imagine that your amyloid plaques have reached that tipping point. Your scale arm has crashed to the floor. You've tripped the cascade, setting fire to the forest, causing inflammation, tangles, and cell death. You should be symptomatic for Alzheimer's. You should be having trouble finding words and keys and remembering what I said at the beginning of this talk. But you might not be. There's one more thing you can do to protect yourself from experiencing the symptoms of Alzheimer's, even if you have the full-blown disease pathology ablaze in your brain. It has to do with neuroplasticity and cognitive reserve. Remember, the experience of having Alzheimer's is ultimately a result of losing synapses. The average brain has over 100 trillion synapses, which is fantastic. We've got a lot to work with. And this isn't a static number. We gain and lose synapses all the time through a process called neuroplasticity. Every time we learn something new, we are creating and strengthening new neural connections, new synapses. In the nun study, 678 nuns, all over the age of 75 when the study began, were followed for more than 2 decades. They were regularly given physical checkups and cognitive tests, and when they died, their brains were all donated for autopsy. In some of these brains, scientists discovered something surprising. Despite the presence of plaques and tangles and brain shrinkage, what appeared to be unquestionable Alzheimer's, the nuns who had belonged to these brains showed no signs of having the disease while they were alive. How can this be? We think it's because these nuns had a high level of cognitive reserve, which is a way of saying that they had more functional synapses. People who have more years of formal education, who have a high degree of literacy, who engage regularly in mentally stimulating activities all have more cognitive reserve. They have an abundance and a redundancy in neural connections. So even if they have a disease like Alzheimer's compromising some of their synapses, they've got many extra backup connections, and this buffers them from noticing that anything is amiss. Let's imagine a simplified example. Let's say you only know one thing about a subject. Let's say it's about me. You know that Lisa Genova wrote Still Alice, and that's the only thing you know about me. You have that single neural connection, that one synapse. Now imagine you have Alzheimer's. You have plaques and tangles and inflammation and microglia devouring that synapse. Now when someone asks you, hey, who wrote Still Alice? You can't remember because that synapse is either failing or gone. You've forgotten me forever. But what if you had learned more about me? Let's say you learned 4 things about me. Now imagine you have Alzheimer's and 3 of those synapses are damaged or destroyed. You still have a way to detour the wreckage. You can still remember my name. So we can be resilient to the presence of Alzheimer's pathology through the recruitment of yet undamaged pathways. And we create these pathways, this cognitive reserve, by learning new things. Now, ideally, we want these new things to be as rich in meaning as possible, recruiting sight and sound and associations and emotion. So this really doesn't mean doing crossword puzzles. You don't want to simply retrieve information you've already learned, because this is like traveling down old familiar streets, cruising neighborhoods you already know. You want to pave new neural roads. Building an Alzheimer's resistant brain means learning to speak Italian, meeting new friends, reading a book, or listening to a great TED Talk. And if despite all of this, you are someday diagnosed with Alzheimer's, there are 3 lessons I've learned from my grandmother and the dozens of people I've come to know living with this disease. Diagnosis doesn't mean you're dying tomorrow. Keep living. You won't lose your emotional memory. You'll still be able to understand love and joy. You might not remember what I said 5 minutes ago, but you'll remember how I made you feel. And you are more than what you can remember. Thank you.
Well, there's a bit to unpack from listening to her. At the beginning, you may have recognized that she said there were no treatments, and yet we showed you a video where there were treatments. Any thoughts about that? Any comments about the videos you've seen? Anything confuse you? And I need to make one more statement. You're all in the process of improving the synapses in your brain and the neurons by coming to these classes. So we encourage you to keep coming to ward off dementia, even if you're developing those tangles and plaques. Okay, any thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Marcia. Unmute yourself first. Wait, unmute. There you go.
Okay, my mother died from Alzheimer's. She was eating a cookie and she fell over some bags. She suffocated due to not being able to eat. My sister just died. She had ALS. She fell twice Saturday, once on Sunday, and died Sunday morning at 11:40. And I think whole food, plant-based is the only way to go. I think you got to eat a variety of foods. I think you don't have to get these diseases if you don't want to die from these crazy diseases. That's all.
Sorry for your recent losses.
Yeah, it's hard.
Any other thoughts?
So even though that video was what 28/17 or something, yeah, there's still no drugs that are that are effective even to today. I think what you meant, the treatment is lifestyle, and that because that Dean Ornish study was just done recently.
So I have a friend who I think he's 82, and I've known him, wow, like 35 years. He started a local triathlon here. He competed in the Hawaii Ironman. He was this amazing athlete and started our triathlon club, got me into triathlons, coached me, just amazing guy. But he also he's recently been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. He also had like several concussions. He had multiple. Oh, he rode his bike across America, like with no SAG support, just him and little packs on his bike. He rode all the way across country. Anyway, um, uh, so I don't know if it's like he's got the diagnosis of Alzheimer's. I'm not sure how much of it is post-traumatic. He's had a lot of falls and things like that. Anyway, so he recently got his driver's license taken away because which that's a long story, but we get together and I'm good friends with him and his wife. I go over there and things like that. He drinks Coca-Cola. He eats snack foods. And yeah, it's like, okay, so now you've got this. So should I be leaning on, I'm like, you shouldn't drink Coke, it's poison. But he's already got it. And he's kind of like, there's not a lot left for him. He's really struggling. He's got some spinal stenosis, so his back hurts, and he's now recently started falling a little bit. And it's like, how much do I lean on him? Like, I mean, I've talked to him in the past before he got Alzheimer's about how, like, these sugar foods and Coke and were really bad, and this and that. But it's like, so now he's not end stage. He's still living independently, but he recently got his license taken away. So he's kind of depressed about that. His balance is off. What do you do? I mean, I could bring him a carton of blueberries, like, and he might eat them, but it's like, I feel very conflicted, and I don't know, he seems to like his snacky foods and, sugar foods and his cans of Coke, and I don't know. Thoughts?
You were here when we played the video of Ornish's study with the guy who could now replay his bagpipe tunes. Did you see that video tonight?
No, I tuned in late.
Oh,
sorry.
Well, I need to play that for you again because you could play it for him.
Okay.
And then he could, if he has enough memory and intact brain enough, he could say, well, how could I do that for myself?
It's
and
on
then
YouTube.
You could go into what he might choose to do.
I mean, he's kind of so he's always been like a super polite guy, a little bit, nice to everybody, even if he was, like, frustrated him. And more recently, he's gotten a little bit angry, which I feel like is part of the progression of his Alzheimer's. He kind of goes off sometimes, and can be a little, gets angry quickly. I really feel like it's part of his disease process, but I would happily play the video for him.
And this is being recorded, so you can just go back and show him the recording of the video we played. Yeah.
It'll be on the website, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always on the homepage for the first week, and then it goes to the archives. So you just have to go to the class
Okay.
archives section. Yeah.
Yeah, I could do that. Okay.
Who else? Yeah, go ahead, Dave. Cherie.
Couldn't figure out how to raise the hand. Yeah, just Alice, I thought the first two videos would probably be good for him. I like Dr. Barnard's also. I thought it was really a good one. And yeah, the change in personality, my dad got Alzheimer's. And I read the 24-hour day is the book at that time they had, and went to some meetings, and they say some people go one way, like the pastor starts swearing at everybody. My dad actually got a little mellower, I thought, as it progressed for him, which was fortunate for us. But you can show him those two movies, and he can decide which way he wants to go. But you can't really force somebody onto plant-based. Like, if somebody tried it 2 years before I was ready, I would have rejected it. You just have to be ready and have a reason. And I think this could be his reason. Anyway, that's it.
Anyone else? Okay, Alice, get your photo, your phone picture camera ready. I'm going to share my screen, and you could take a video and or a picture and get the name of the videos. If you don't want to share the full video with him, you could share these videos individually with him. And let's see. Yeah. So the one that he needs to look at for sure is a testimonial from Dr. Ornish, Alzheimer's progression, and how it actually shows reversal, which is pretty inspiring. And then over here, the ones that Dave said, the Power Foods for the Brain by Neil Barnard. You can find this one on YouTube. This other one is on nutritionfacts.org, Dr. Greger's site. And then this is a YouTube presentation, what you can do to prevent Alzheimer's. He may be past the understanding of that, but Barnard's presentation would be really good. So now that you have these videos, I'm going to go on and play the next one here. Brain healthy foods to fight aging. We have a few more minutes, and we can kind of keep scanning through these.
There's an extensive scientific literature describing the positive impact of dietary plant compounds on overall health and longevity. However, it's only now becoming clear that the consumption of diets rich in plant foods can influence neuroinflammation, brain inflammation, leading to the expression of cytoprotective, cell-protective, and restorative proteins. Just over the last decade, remarkable progress has been made to realize that oxidative stress and chronic low-grade inflammation are major risk factors underlying brain aging, so no wonder antioxidant and anti-inflammatory foods may help. The brain is especially vulnerable to free radical attack, oxidative stress, due to its high fat content and its cauldron of high metabolic activity. You don't want your brains to go rancid, so you'd think one of the major fat-soluble dietary antioxidants like beta-carotene would step in. But the major carotenoid concentrated in the brain is actually lutein. The brain just preferentially sucks it up. For example, if you look at the oldest old, like in the Georgia centenarian study, recognizing that oxidation is involved in age-related cognitive decline, they figured dietary antioxidants may play a role in its prevention or delay, so they looked at 8 different ones, vitamin A, vitamin E, on down the list, and only lutein was significantly related to better cognition. Now, in this study, they looked at brain tissue on autopsy. By then, it's a little too late. So how could you study the effects of diet on the brain while you're still alive? I mean, if only there was a way we could physically look into the living brain with our own two eyes. There is, with our own two eyes. The retina. The back of our eyeball is actually an extension of our central nervous system, an outpouching of the brain during development. And right in the middle, there's a spot. This is what the doctor sees when they look into your eye with that bright light. That spot, called the macula, is our HD camera, where you get the highest resolution vision, and it's packed with lutein. And indeed, levels in the retina correspond to levels in the rest of your brain. So your eyes can be a window into your brain. So now we can finally do studies on live people to see if diet can affect lutein levels in the eyes, which reflects lutein levels in the brain, and see if that correlates with improvements in cognitive function. And indeed, significant correlations exist between the amount of macular pigment, these plant pigments like lutein, in your eye, and cognitive test scores. You can demonstrate this on functional MRI scans, suggesting lutein and a related plant pigment called zeaxanthin promote cognitive functioning in old age by enhancing neural efficiency, the efficiency by which our nerves communicate. Check out this cool study on white matter integrity using something called diffusion tensor imaging, which provides unique insights into brain network connectivity, allowing you to follow the nerve tracks throughout the brain. And researchers were able to show enhanced circuit integrity based on how much lutein and zeaxanthin they could see in people's eyes, further evidence of a meaningful relationship between diet and integrity of our brains, particularly in regions vulnerable to age-related decline. So do Alzheimer's patients have less of this macular pigment? Significantly less lutein in their eyes, significantly less lutein in their blood, and a higher occurrence of macular degeneration, where this pigment layer gets destroyed. The thickness of this plant pigment layer in your eyes can be measured and may be a potential marker for the beginnings of Alzheimer's. Well, let's not wait that long, though. We know macular pigment density is related to cognitive function in older people. What about during middle age? One apparent consequence of aging appears to be loss of some aspects of cognitive control, which starts out early, in mid-adulthood, but not in everybody, suggesting maybe something like diet could be driving some of the differences. Here's a measure of cognitive control showing younger, on average, do better than older adults. But older adults who have high macular pigment, lots of lutein in the back of their eyes, do significantly better. These results suggest that the protective role of carotenoids like lutein within the brain may be evident during early and middle adulthood, decades prior to the onset of more apparent cognitive decline later in life. You can take 20-year-olds and show superior auditory function in those with more macular pigment in their eyes. Look, the auditory system, our hearing, like the rest of our central nervous system, is ultimately constructed and maintained by diet, and is therefore not surprisingly sensitive to dietary intake throughout life, all the way back to childhood. Higher macular pigment is associated with higher academic achievement among school children. You can look into a kid's eyes and get some sense of how well they may do in subjects like math and writing. This finding is important because macular lutein is modifiable and can be manipulated by dietary intake. Okay, so where is lutein found? The avocado and egg industries like to boast about how much of these macular pigments they have in their products, but the real superstars are dark green leafy vegetables. A half a cup of kale has 50 times more than an egg. A spinach salad or a 50-egg omelet. And the earlier, the better. Pregnant and breastfeeding women should definitely be checking off my daily dozen green servings, but it's also apparently never too late. While some age-related cognitive decline is to be expected, these effects may be less pronounced among those eating more green and leafy. But you don't know for sure until you put it to the test, which we'll explore next.
And here we're going to do one more video and then we'll go back to the questions.
What is behind the dramatic increase in dementia in Japan over recent decades? Maybe it's rising obesity rates, or the increases in cholesterol, saturated fat, and iron from increases in animal products and meat. Overall calories just went up about 10% in Japan, whereas animal fat and meat consumption rose 500%, about 10 times the rise in sugary junk. Now, during this time span, rice consumption went down, but the thinking is that rather than white rice somehow being protective, maybe they were just eating something worse instead. It's like when you find fish consumption is correlated with less disease. You wonder if it's because they're eating that rather than some worse meat. If you look across multiple countries, you see a similar pattern, with the most important dietary link to Alzheimer's appearing to be meat consumption, with eggs and high-fat dairy also maybe contributing. There appears to be a really tight correlation between Alzheimer's and per capita meat supply. And then studies within countries uncover similar findings, with Alzheimer's and cognitive decline associated with meaty, sweety, fatty diets, whereas most plant foods were associated with risk reduction. This could be for a variety of reasons. Animal products tend to have more copper, mercury, lead, cadmium, no folate, but contain saturated fat and cholesterol, and pro-inflammatory advanced glycation end products. So many mechanisms that dietary modification may be our best bet for reducing risk of Alzheimer's disease. But how do we know its cause and effect? The evidence that meat consumption is causally linked to Alzheimer's disease, well, there's the strength of the association, the consistency across different types of studies, the fact that the dietary changes preceded the risk of dementia, the dose response, more meat linked to more risk, a bunch of plausible mechanisms. We know meat is a risk factor for other chronic diseases, but there's never been a randomized controlled trial to put it to the test. When you read reviews of the damaging effects of high-fat diets to the brain and cognition, a number of factors are proposed to account for the high-fat diet-induced damage to the brain: oxidative stress, insulin resistance, inflammation, and changes to blood vessels of the integrity of the blood-brain barrier. But these are based mostly on studies of rodents. Yes, high-fat diets can cause energy dysfunction in the brain, based on fancy MRI techniques, but if you're looking at that thinking, "That's so weird-looking brain," that's because those are rat brains. Let me show you two sets of human cerebral arteries, the arteries deep inside your skull. These are the brain arteries, on autopsy, of non-demented elderly individuals. Here are the arteries from Alzheimer's patients, clogged nearly completely shut with atherosclerotic plaque packed with fat and cholesterol. With CT scans, you can follow this intracranial artery stenosis, this brain artery clogging over time, and follow the progression from mild cognitive impairment to Alzheimer's disease. Those who only had low-grade stenosis were pretty stable over time in terms of their cognitive function and ability to dress themselves in other activities of daily living, whereas those with more clogging started slipping over the years, and those who started out with the most brain atherosclerosis rapidly went downhill and twice as likely to progress to full-blown Alzheimer's. Chronic consumption of standard Western diets enriched in saturated fat and cholesterol may compromise our cerebrovascular integrity, compromise the blood vessels in our brain. So, of course, drugs are recommended, pharmacological modulation of diet-induced dysfunction, but why not just try to eat healthier in the first place?
So, I hope that image of the vessels kind of imprints in your brain, and that you give serious thought to whatever you can do to prevent our number one killer in our country or around the world is heart disease. And just equate that to, if I can prevent the heart disease, I can keep my arteries open and potentially even prevent the dementia. And so what is it that's going to prevent heart disease and dementia and so many of your other chronic illnesses? It's every time you meet in this meeting with us, there is a similar theme. You hear it over and over again. It kind of is a one sentence thing. Eat more something, eat less something. Two blanks to fill in. And that's the message that you get every time, I hope. Any thoughts from anyone? I'm having way too much fun here. I've kind of taken the wind out of your sails here, but I do want to briefly review the basics that we went over here. The basics are, we started out with hope. After we saw that depressing video of how many millions of us are going to wind up with dementia, we played that video that really gave us hope that you could take someone who's lost their ability to keep playing the tunes that they knew how to play, and they lost their ability because of dementia. And then they were placed on an Ornish style program, this person and several others. And they actually, after, I don't know how long it was it a year, or I don't know how long.
I think it was 22 months.
Yeah, 22 months. They were placed on a plant-based diet, exercised on a regular basis, put in yoga and meditation groups, and I don't know if he put them in groups to love more and hate less, but that's the Ornish style. Those are the pretty much the building blocks of how he helps people reverse heart disease. And gosh, it worked. It worked for so many of them. It was totally amazing. And really does give us hope that we don't have to feel that dementia is our destiny. So that's one aspect. The other is the aspect of focusing attention on exercise, but not focusing our attention solely on exercise, because I hope you have reached the understanding that you cannot out-exercise a bad diet. And what that means generally is you can maintain your weight by doing enough exercise, but you can't keep your arteries from clogging up. You can't stop the damage that's going to continue to your kidneys by eating a low carb, high saturated fat diet. And you can't stop that by just exercising the heck out of your body. And yet we've been led to believe for years that exercise is really what the problem is. And we've ignored the fact that food is the new smoking. And so now we've got what we eat, how we move, and then what else? How we engage ourselves with the world, how much we're learning new things, new activities is really important when it comes to preventing dementia, at least
good sleep too.
And sleep. So that has what, 4 of the major pillars potentially. And then of course we all know alcohol and smoking wouldn't be healthy, and stress,
social connection.
So focusing on those aspects are really the key to preventing dementia for you or your family members, people who you love.
Can I show the book? I'll share my screen.
Good.
The book I recommended for this class. Let me share my screen here. Assuming you can see it, my screen. I can get this to. There we go.
I can see it.
All right. Okay. So you just go to the home page and then go to resources. click on the resources tab and then scroll down to links to books. Click on that and then scroll down and have all the different books for the different classes. So go all the way down to the Alzheimer's and dementia, which is right there. Alzheimer's Solution by Dr. Dean and Aisha Shirzai. That's a really good one. They're a married couple. They're both neurologists and they do research on Alzheimer's. So I really recommend that book if you want a book focusing on dementia and brain health. That's a great one. All right.
Will you just show on the homepage how I can find this week's video? Because I don't usually.
Oh, sure. Let me
Thanks.
go back here. Back to share in a sec. Okay, so just go to the home page, scroll back to the top. Got the home page here. And then, so the most recent class is always posted on the home page below the tutorial. So the tutorial is something everyone should watch just to get familiar with how to navigate the website. So check that out. And then the most recent class I always post here, but then after a week it goes into the archives. And so what you got to do is come up here. It'll teach you how to do it on the tutorial, but if you click on class archives, you'll get to this archives page, and then right here it says complete class archives, including the most recent classes. You click that. So it's just a couple of clicks. And then you get here, you have to do one more click. It says to see the most recent recorded classes, click the link below, then click on videos. And the reason for the extra click is it takes you to our YouTube channel that we have for these classes. So you click here one more time. Then it said to go to videos. And so right now it's on the home. Live Lifestyle Medicine homepage. We have 120 subscribers, but to just click videos like it said in the last link at the last link. Click there, and then it goes in reverse order of the classes, and so newest to oldest. And so there's the one from last week there, and then further back all the way. You can keep going. There's 179 videos on here, so. So we've been doing a lot of classes. So yeah, just go back to close that out. So yeah, just homepage, class archives, and then complete class archives. You could jump to some of the older ones if you wanted to, 2023, 2022, but this just gives you the reverse order of all of them here. You just have to do one more click. I know it's kind of a lot of clicks, but and there you go, and then just go to videos. And there it is, all of them in reverse order. All right.
Did you say those were YouTube? Could we tell people to go to the YouTube also?
Yeah, if they probably have to subscribe through it though. So you go to, I think people have found it by just searching Live Lifestyle Medicine on YouTube, and you could probably find it. But once you go to it once, and you could click subscribe, and then it'll be saved in your favorites, and you'll always get it. But you can also always just get it from the website,
great.
the Live Lifestyle Medicine website.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and if you had any questions about any of that, just watch that website tutorial on the homepage. I kind of show how to do everything there, and you can watch it as many times as you want. It's just a recording.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
You're welcome. Next week, I'm doing Lifestyle Medicine Pioneers, so paying homage to the founders that came before us and the shoulders we stand on, Charlie and I. So I'm going to do that a week from today, and that'll be the last one before the March 25th. Tuesday, March 25th will be the introduction class. We'll be starting a whole new 12-week series as of a week or 2 weeks from today. So look forward to that if you want to start over from the beginning.
And for those of you who are living in this area and want to attend a potluck, it's coming up, next Saturday?
Yeah, this coming Saturday. I'm going to send out a reminder tomorrow night if you're subscribed to the newsletter, you'll receive that and has all the details about the potluck. But it's this coming Saturday at 12 o'clock noon at the First Christian Church of Springfield and on Centennial. And again, all the details are there in the newsletter, and I'll send out a reminder tomorrow night.
And then again, there's for those of you who live locally, the Vegan Fest coming up in May. You want to tell them what date? Is it the 4th?
Yeah, Sunday, May 4th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Lane Event Center, Lane County Fairgrounds, Eugene Vegan Fest. And so that's also in the newsletter every week. Shows that, and there's a website for it, and you can volunteer, you can come. There's music and food and children's area and concurrent lectures. We're doing a health. There's one room that's full of health focused topics that we're doing through Eugene plant-based providers, and then there's another room that's called the impact room, and that's all about animal welfare and the environment and kind of all that stuff. But yeah, lots of great things going on for that Vegan Fest. First ever Eugene Vegan Fest.
All right. Well, we managed to wrap that up in a reasonable length tonight. And glad to have you all, and look forward to seeing you back again in about a week or so. Thanks, Scott, and everyone else.
All right, yeah.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
See y'all on Saturday.
All right.
All right.
Take care.